Picture this. You're about to sit down and play with a new band or singer, and they hand you a chord chart for a song. The first 4 bars of the chord chart say G, E minor, C, and D. You already know all the notes in these chords, and I guess you could just sit down and play them in their basic form, also known as root position. But perhaps there's another way. Over the years, I've worked with so many piano and keys players, and while they understand what notes are in each chord, sometimes they find it hard to play a sequence so it sounds creative, natural, and most importantly, so the chords flow from one to the next. In this video, I'm going to show you some really simple strategies for how you can develop the way you play from chord charts and take your keys playing to the next level. Let's dive in. Hello, welcome back to the Keys Coach YouTube channel. My name's Adam, and in this video, I'm going to show you some really simple ways that you can get better at playing from chord charts. Now, the first thing to ask is what actually even is a chord chart? Chord charts often just have the main chords of the song written out. So for the example we're going to use today, the chords are going to be G, E minor, C, and D. Most of the time you just have the chords written out, but sometimes you might have slashes in the bar as well. So for example, if you're in 4/4, which means there's 4 beats in a bar, there might be 4 slashes in each bar, and that can really help you show where each of the chords fall. Sometimes chord charts also have the lyrics written either above or below, but in the example we're going to look at today, we're just going to look at the chords. So one of the first things to do is to think about what key you're in. So in this particular example, we're in the key of G. All of those chords in that sequence come from the key of G. So we've got G, which is chord 1. Then we go to E minor, which is chord 6, sometimes known as the relative minor. Then you have C, which is chord 4. And then chord 5. It's a really common chord sequence this that goes into so many songs. 1, 6, 4, 5. And we're not looking at complex chords here. We're not talking about extensions, sevenths, all of these different things. We're just talking about triads. How do you make simple major and minor triads sound really good, full, and rich? Well, the first step is to get your bass line really secure. We need to nail down what we're playing in the left hand. I'm going to start out thinking of this as some kind of piano ballad, a really slow song. And the great thing about starting slow is that it gives you more processing time. You've got more time between the chords to work out what you're going to play. And I'm just going to click my fingers while I'm doing this. Again, you're working on loads of hand independence here, keeping a really good groove, getting it really secure in your left hand. The other thing is you don't always have to go up to the notes, watch. You can go down to the E, you can go down again to the C, and then up to the D. It's all about varying it. It's like your left hand has to take care of business on its own. Because the right hand is often where most of the more rhythmic stuff happens. It's quite hard to play the bass line and talk and keep it in time, but that should give you an idea of what that part of the process looks like. Another thing you can do is play octaves in your left hand. Now, you don't necessarily have to play the octave together like that. You can actually separate the notes out. So watch this. One more thing to practice in your left hand is to put the 5th of the next chord in just before you change. Let me just break that down for you. So what I'm doing there is I'm playing the root notes. Now the next chord is an E minor, so I'm going to do a quick B, which is the 5th of E minor. See that? Then the next chord's a C, so the 5th of that is a G. See that? Then an A, because that's the 5th of D. I'll do it once more. So you can see we've got a few different ideas now we can use in our left hand. We've got the single notes, we've got the octaves, and then we've got this little 5th jump thing we're doing. So we've got these little things in our toolkit that we can throw in a bit later on when we put hands together. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add in our right hand part. It's so tempting to play all of these chords all in root position. Watch this. If you take one thing away from this video, it's this. Remember this. don't start in root position. Okay, you've got to start as you mean to go on. Start in an inversion. Start either in first inversion or second inversion. Now, if you don't know what inversions are, they are so simple to understand. People make them very, very complex. They're not at all. All they are is you're changing the order of the notes. Well, we start with our root position, which is like that. It's got the root at the bottom, it's got the third and the fifth. All you do to get first inversion is move this note up an octave. So watch this. That note that was originally down there has gone up there. That's first inversion. You then move this one up an octave. And there's your second inversion. It's super simple. So we've done that now for G. We need to do that for all of the chords in our sequence. So let's have a look at the next chord, which is E minor. We're going to move that note, the root, up an octave. And we're then going to move that note up an octave, the G. There we go, there's second inversion, E minor. So far we've got this. There's our G. And here's our E minor. Now these shapes are quite hard to get under your fingers. The reason why they're quite hard is because the gaps between the notes are different. You need to kind of get used to the feeling of them. I always think of root position as completely equal. Those notes, if you look, they're completely equally spaced. When you get to first inversion, you've got this slightly bigger gap between the top two ones. So that's kind of what I think of first inversion. And then when you get to second inversion, the gap moves here. Do you see that? Between the first note and the second note. So you can kind of get the feel of these, but it's going to take a while. So we probably need to look at a way of how you practice these. But before we do that, let's just make sure we've got the inversion sorted for the other chords in the sequence. So there's our C major chord. We're going to move this note up an octave. C major in first inversion. C major in second inversion. We've moved that note up an octave there. There's our D triad. We're going to move this note up an octave, the root. And then we do the same again. There's our second inversion for D. As you can see, there's quite a lot to take in here. So I've put together a PDF lesson book which goes through every single step in this video. You can download it by clicking the link in the description. It's completely free and it's going to really help you get all of the things we cover in this video under your fingers. Go ahead and grab your copy. So the next step is to actually practice these inversions. And rather than just playing them, you know, over and over like that, we're actually going to find a way to practice them musically in kind of the context of a song or something that at least sounds like a musical thing. So if I take this, for example, I'm just going to play root notes of a G in my left hand. I'm just going to arpeggiate. Actually, you know what? Let's not start in root position. I said earlier you shouldn't start in root position. I just started in root position. Let's go to first inversion. So do you see what I'm doing there? Let's jump up. So that's first inversion. This is second inversion. All right, let's do root position now. Do you see that? Doesn't sound as rich, but immediately it sounds more basic. But it's good to have it under your fingers. Okay, so there is G. Let's do the same thing with C. We're going to start in our right hand. When I'm talking about inversions, don't forget I'm only talking about the right hand part. Okay, I'm not talking about the left hand. If you're thinking, oh, I thought inversions was where you had a different note in your left hand, I'll cover that in another video. Okay, we're just thinking about the right hand part here. So you want to do this with every single chord in your sequence. And the reason why this is so good to practice is because you have to immediately move to the next inversion. What you don't want to really be doing is this. And then spending ages trying to find the next inversion. The whole point of practicing this is to go straight to the next inversion when you move. Do you see I'm now moving quicker than I was before? I'm sort of moving double the speed. So we're now at the point where we can play all of the different chords in our chord sequence with different inversions in our right hand. We now need to look at putting all of this together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start in, say, second inversion for G major, okay? So there's our second inversion triad in our right hand. And I'm going to think about the direction of travel that I want this hand to go. I'm going to say we're going to go down to the E minor, up to the C, and then back down to the D. So what I have to do is I have to move this hand using the fewest notes possible, but I'm going to go in a downward direction. So watch this. I start on a G. To get to an E minor, the closest way moving down would be there. Okay, there's our E minor. That also happens to be a second inversion E minor. You don't really have to worry about what inversions these are, as long as you're playing the right notes. Okay, now how do I get to a C chord moving in an upward direction? Well, actually here, I only need to move one note. I only need to move this B up there. Now we do have a root position chord there, but you know, one root position is fine. And then I'm going to move down to a D chord. There it is. So what have I got there? Down to there, go up to the C, just talking about my right hand here, and then back down to the D. Let's do it again. Do you see that? So I've thought about the direction of travel that my hand's moving. So now let's try another way. Rather than starting in second inversion, we're going to start in first inversion in our right hand. And rather than going down, down, we're going to go up, up to get to each chord, right? So how do I go up to get to E minor? Well, actually what I can do is I can just move this note here, the D, up to an E. We've got an E minor chord. Do you see that? Okay, so I've gone up to the E minor. I'm now going to go down to the C, which is there. There we go. I've moved all of those notes. That's quite a big jump there. Do you see that? And I've gone now up to the D. Let me show you all of that. Up to the E minor, down to the C, and then up to the D. One of the things people sometimes ask when I show them this, it's like, oh right, do I always have to do like up, down, or down, down? No, you can completely mix it up. You can go down, down, or up. You can start on first inversion, you can start on second inversion. The most important thing though to take away is to mix it up. Don't do the same thing over and over again. If you played it one way once, play it a different way the second time. And that is what's going to make your chord progressions when you're playing sound way more natural and more creative. So I want to just show you one more thing before we move on about these inversions. You might notice that when I'm going between two chords, some notes stay the same. So for example, if I go between G and E minor, and I go to E minor like that, the G and the B have remained the same in both chords, but the D has moved up to an E. So the way I like to think of it is that as some things change, some things stay the same. And isn't that just like a beautiful metaphor for life as well? So here the G and the B has stayed the same, but the D has moved up to an E. Now you might have heard this called voice leading, and it's a really, really great thing in music. But just the biggest thing to take away from this is find the notes that stay the same and keep those where they are. It's so funny because often the first thing you learn when you're playing piano is those root position triads. But actually the best thing to do is to move away from them as quickly as possible. Get these inversions under your belt because they're going to sound so much more musical and so much more natural. So we now need to move on to the next step, which is thinking about the rhythm we're playing. Okay, let's move away from the notes. So the first thing to do is just play 4 beats in every bar in your right hand. Now, as you can see, that sounds okay, but I think it could have a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is whatever the lowest note is in my right hand, so for example on that G chord, it's this one here, I'm going to hold that note down. Sounds a little bit better. You've got a note that's kind of sustained throughout each bar. But another thing you can do is actually use that note to kind of add a bit more rhythmic kind of ideas. Let me just show you this. So as you can see, I'm kind of toggling between, I call this the toggle. I don't know if that's the right way to call it, but you're kind of toggling between your thumb or whatever is the lowest finger you're using in the chord, and then the upper part of the chord as well. So you might be thinking to yourself as I'm playing that, oh, I recognize that from that song. So many piano players use this. Elton John uses this all of the time in his accompaniment style. I call it the toggle. You can call it the Elton John. It's whatever you want to call it, but it's basically where you toggle between the lowest note in the triad and the upper part. And what you can also do is you can add in another inversion at the end of the bar. This is getting a little bit more complex, but let me just show you what this sounds like, because this is where it really begins to flow a lot more. See that? So at the end of each bar, I'm moving. See that? It's just a really, really great way to make it flow even more and give it more of a melody in your right-hand part. Now, talking of melodies, this is where it really starts to get quite interesting. Let's just go back to our original toggle or our Elton John or whatever you want to call it. Back to this. Now, rather than playing another inversion at the top, at the end of each bar, I'm going to try and come up with a little melody, just a tiny little thing, can be different every time. Just using the notes in the G major scale. Yeah, I'm going to come up with something completely free. Let me just show you what this sounds like. So do you see? I'm just putting in a little melody at the end of each bar. And what that's doing is it's just helping gel the chords together a little bit more and make the music kind of go on a bit of a journey rather than it being these kind of blocks of chords. And the only notes I'm using there are notes from the G major scale. Now, you don't have to use all of the notes. You could think, right, I'm actually only going to do this using the root and the fifth. I'm going to come up with something in between each chord that uses the root and the fifth of the key. Okay, not of each chord, of the key. We're in the key of G, so I'm always going to use G and D. Watch this, I'll simplify it even more. Do you get the idea? It's super simple, but it just begins to make it sound far more like music. Okay, there's one more step I'm going to show you today, and I know I've covered quite a lot of ground in the video already, and I've gone quite fast. Over the coming weeks and months, I'm going to be doing deeper dives on all of the different topics that we've covered in this video. So the best thing you can do is like the video, subscribe to the channel and ding the bell, because that will mean that you'll be notified every time I release a new video. There are so many more videos coming your way, but the last step for today is to make our triad sound colourful. And I've already done this a little bit in the video already, and you may well have spotted it. What I occasionally do, take the original triad, I can add in a second, which would be an A. Okay, and you might have heard this called add 9 or sus2 or something like that. I'm just going to think of it for the moment as a way of adding colour to the chord. And what you can do is you can play this note instead of the root, like that. You can play this note instead of the third, like that. Or you can just play all of the notes together. You've got 3 different options. And what this does, it just adds a little bit of colour to the chord. So let me just show you what this sounds like in the sequence if I change some of our triads for these kind of more colourful versions. I'll just show you. And you can see all I was really doing there was moving from that colourful note, the second or the 9th, up to the 3rd. See that? And it just gives it even more movement, even more colour, makes it sound richer. It's just a really common thing that people do on major and minor chords in a key. I host a podcast. It's called the Keys Coach Podcast. It comes out each week, and I interview different keys players, piano players, synth players from around the world and talk about their journey in music. It's available on all platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, if you want to go and check it out. But recently I did an episode with the amazing Bryn Blisker. She has played with everyone, Olivia Rodrigo, Jacob Collier, so many amazing musicians. And she calls this colour note, the add 9th, the 9th, the 2nd, she calls it the secret sauce, and I completely agree with her. It's like a note you can add to any chord sequence that's got a major or minor triad in it, and it just makes it ring so much more. So I know I've covered a lot of ground in this video and there are so many more videos to come, but let me just amalgamate everything we've done right the way through, from the bass line, through to the inversions, through to the adding the colour, the different rhythms, the melody notes. Let me just put it all together, and I'm going to play a bit of a longer sequence so you can just hear what it sounds like in context. Let me show you. Don't forget to go and grab your free PDF lesson book. The link is in the episode description. It goes through all of the steps I've covered in this video, so you can take it away and work on this at home. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and ding the bell. And if you're looking for another video to take your keys playing to the next level, check out this video right here.